I think we all need to be practicing a little more social intelligence, a little more emotional intelligence, and actually be considering things like empathy, and taking a step back. So if we see something that annoys us or rubs us the wrong way, or even if someone says something that's upsetting directly, I think it's very important right now to pause before responding and consider maybe what that person might be going through.
Excited to be together again this morning and see everyone, and excited to talk with Dave Delaney. We spent time, I don't know, seems like 2 or 3 months ago, talking a
Mm.
bit about Dave's journey and the interesting things he's done and the work he does now, which I think is incredibly relevant compared to the good old days a year ago when folks all worked together in one place. And now with how work is distributed, I think the challenges around what Dave does and the need is even greater. But we'll get to that. Dave, why don't we start and you just tell everybody a little bit about your story and your journey and some of the things you've done along the way that you learned from.
Thanks, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet you all today. Um, I am based in Nashville. I've been here about 14 years with my family, and it took me a trip. Yesterday was a very special day because yesterday was, of course, St. Patrick's Day, and I'm actually Canadian. I'm from Toronto originally, but I've been here 14 years, and I ended up in Nashville because I met my wife, who's from Tennessee, in Galway, Ireland. So you never know where life's going to take you. And we subsequently had Irish twins as well. So for those of you who are not familiar, that means that the kids are born less than a year apart. They're 11 and a half months apart. So we always say one was planned, one wasn't, but we won't say who. But yeah, so I've been working in marketing and communications pretty much my whole career. I've worked in performing arts and I worked for a newspaper in promotions and a television network in Canada before moving south to the States to Nashville, where I worked for an e-commerce site and a hardware computer technology hardware company. But I've always worked around communications has been sort of that theme. And yeah, so I wrote a book a few years ago called New Business Networking. You can still find it on Amazon and the usual spots. But yeah, and then you know that's that's the bulk of what I do. I mean, I write a lot, and I'm a keynote speaker, and I do a lot of corporate training, both privately and at conferences as well. So yeah,
So a lot of your focus today is really around communications, isn't it?
it is. Yes, yeah. I think we can all do a better job at how we communicate. It's fun because like I do a portion of my talk about listening and like how to actively listen of one of my talks. And I always ask the audience, like, show of hands, who's a perfect speaker? And there's always like one guy in the back who's like, I'm a perfect speaker. And I'm like, no, you're not. Or a perfect listener, excuse me. Uh, and and it's always interesting to see that kind of response. But yeah, so communication is key. Absolutely.
So if you go back a year ago, you know, in most workplaces, you could get everybody together in a room and convey your message and try and build a culture and try and build teamwork. And now people are scattered. So what are you seeing as some of the challenges business leaders face in using the tools available today to spread their message and build some sense of teamwork?
Yeah, I mean, doing things remotely obviously has been very challenging for a lot of folks. I think keeping keeping a line of dialogue open with your team members is such an important thing that you know let's face it. I mean, a leader of a company or even a department is quite busy throughout the day. So they're trying to knock stuff out, and they don't sometimes make enough time for like casual virtual coffees or something like that where they can have a little personal chat with their team members either as a group or individually. So I think that has been a big challenge where leaders are often either forgetting to do that or neglecting it, and not into a fault, but just, you're trying to keep the wheels on, right, during this crazy time. And so sometimes that gets forgotten, and that's such a key important point of keeping that dialogue open with your team members, because we all know how expensive it is to replace a team member, and rehire and train, and then if that doesn't work out, so that's a very important step, is keeping that dialogue open.
If any of you have questions on communications and culture and teamwork, type them in the chat. We'll get you open.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges, Dave, that I've seen over the last year, whether it be at church, at school, at work, is things flare up. The divisions of today flare up more because we are apart, where it used to be if you saw each other every day, you would just talk through things. And now because we're pounding away on the keyboard, tensions flare up. What are you doing to help advise people how to deal with the tension of today that's in media and social media, and that can, when we don't use the right emoji, we make everybody mad?
Yeah, and I've done that before, actually. I have a younger brother, and I once sent him a text, and it was a little explicit, and he got all mad at me, but I was actually like just joking around, but I didn't leave like a little happy emoji next to it to show, or a little JK to show that I was joking. But oftentimes, well, like this gets confused or lost in online dialogue, and I'm a proponent of social media. I've been on social networks since the very early days. I think I've been tweeting since 2007. Uh, so I've been on these social networks for a long time. But yeah, as you're saying, I mean, with division and with miscommunication, it happens a lot. So I find, well, just last night, I was introduced to. I just started using Twitter's Spaces function, which is a brand new thing from Twitter, which allows people to. It's similar to what's called Clubhouse, which is a popular app right now, where you can speak on social networks, like talk to one another, as opposed to just writing messages. And I think that's an interesting thing. But backing up to your question, I think we all need to be practicing a little more social intelligence, a little more emotional intelligence, and actually be considering things like empathy, and taking a step back. So if we see something that annoys us, or rubs us the wrong way, or even if someone says something that's upsetting directly, I think it's very important right now to pause before responding and consider maybe what that person might be going through. I think that's how things get heated up. I think a lot is we don't put ourselves in the shoes of others, and so that's empathy is just such an important thing.
Let's go to Adam.
You want me to ask the question? Well, tell me about the NICE method, Dave. That sounds. I love the acronym very much. So tell me about it.
Yeah,
tell
thanks,
us
Adam.
about it.
Yeah. So what I've been doing over the years is providing workshops and training. I speak a lot about communication and how to communicate effectively. And my book about networking, I kicked myself in a way because it was my first book. And so I went with my publisher's feedback on the title, but the book is called New Business Networking. But I probably would have called it Networking for Nice People. In fact, I have a book or a website actually called networkingfornicepeople.com. And so the idea here is to always try to find ways to serve others first and foremost. Now, we all need to make a living, of course, that's a given, but I'm a big believer in approaching things in a nice way, in a positive way, and in a way that we can make people feel empowered and heard. And so the NICE method is a training package that I deliver to organizations, either to the leadership specifically, or to the entire company. I've done workshops in both cases. I just did one for a whole division of FedEx last January before, before everything went crazy. But that was my last in-person. And so it's an acronym that stands for needs assessment. So the first step in the NICE method is for me to determine what your needs are specifically in your organization. The second, the I, stands for increasing social intelligence and emotional intelligence in team members. The third is the communication mastery, which is a workshop I actually do on its own as well, that incorporates my background with using skills that I learned from improv, which I can talk more about, and applying those to the organization. And then finally, empowering employees. So making sure that what I share and what I teach team members, they can implement and use right away, and continue using as well.
It's interesting you mentioned improv, and I think of a half a dozen times that's come up over the past year of this show where we've had different people on speaking, and there was some point in their life where they did improv. Talk a little bit about that, because something I've missed.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. So the thing with improv, so I do a training for organizations. It's a presentation, and then we do some activities together virtually or in person, and it's called the Master Communicator's Secret Weapon. And that secret weapon is improv. And I always like to tell the organizers, obviously, or the meeting planners, or whoever's hiring me, that the secret weapon is improv. But I don't like to tell everybody that it's improv initially, because improv can it can either confuse people or rub them the wrong way, depending sometimes, right? Some people can be excited about improv if you've seen, and some people may be scratching their heads, not knowing what improv is. So improvisation and improv is a form of comedy. It's like sketch and scene comedy delivered live and completely improvised. So if you've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, you'd be familiar with improv. And so I trained with Second City in Toronto, who is really one of the first and foremost companies who specialize in improv. If you ever watched SCTV back in the day with Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy from Schitt's Creek, that's where they got their start, and John Candy and Rick Moranis and all those crazies. Some of you are like, what? I see some grayer people, so I'm hoping you're all with me on that one. Sometimes I have to be careful. I'll talk about like computing, and I'll talk about like, back in the BBS days, and people are like, wait, what? But there are things that you learn in improv that you can apply to how you communicate. And so my training and the presentations that I do around this share these key takeaways from improv. But the key thing is that I'm not making people perform improv. So you could be shy or more introverted and be like, oh God, I wouldn't want to do that. But the point is that there are key takeaways that you can take from improv. And that's what I share in that training is how you can actively listen to people, how you can accept and then build upon it using an exercise called yes and I do a spin called nice and things like that. And also not fearing failure. In our own businesses, if we were to fear failure, we would never innovate. Right? We would never move our businesses forward because we'd be frozen in one spot. So it's so important to be able to face those fears in a reasonable way, of course, and move forward. And the same applies to improv. So there's direct correlations between communication, and these are actually been scientifically studied as well. There's Dr. Kim, who did a whole study on improvisation and how it triggers areas of the brain and how it's applied in business. He's got a TED talk about it, which is pretty interesting.
If you go back and think about the journey to building towards the NICE method, who inspired you? Who motivated you? Did you learn good lessons from bad leaders? Did you learn good lessons from great leaders? What actually shaped the model that you go out and teach today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been I've had the good fortune of working under some great leaders, and also the moderate fortune to work under some poor leaders, and learn from what I experience. And I'll tell you, as it applies to using this nice and methodology as part of it, um, there's an exercise that I do about building upon an idea. So, for example, this is an incident that happened to me. I was working for a company, and we got to join the C-suite. This is years ago, and offer an idea for a product when we had ideas. And so I was new to this company, and so they kind of pushed me like, go do it. So I put up my hand, and I spoke to, and it was a total like boardroom sort of setting, right? And I spoke to the CEO, and I said, here's my idea. And I shared the idea, and he said, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. And you can imagine how I felt after that. And what I realized, and what I've learned, and what I teach, is that he could have done it a little differently. Now, I should add here that it could have been the stupidest idea, right? But you can bet I never gave another idea while I was there, and I might have had a great idea. So the point here is to use this nice and methodology, and yes, and is exactly it, Adam. Absolutely. Where you build upon that idea. So the idea here is, instead, he could have used this nice and, or yes and approach. So he could have said, instead, nice, and let's talk about it more after the meeting over coffee. Or nice, and let's talk to sales to see if this is something our customers are asking for, or our prospects are seeking. Or nice, and let's talk to customer service and see if this is an issue or something we hear from our customers about. So by doing this activity, by doing this little exercise, you make the team member feel empowered. You make them feel heard. And so I'm not suggesting you would say, yes, nice, and let's do it. Let's throw millions of dollars into every idea. That's obviously not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that by accepting it and building upon it, you allow that person to be heard. Right? You make them feel empowered. And the truth is, companies pivot, right? I mean, we've all probably been in different situations, whether it's our own businesses or different organizations, where we have pivoted. I in one of the talks I do, I talk about Nintendo as a good example of this, where Nintendo was a card game in Japan. And we all know Nintendo. If we have teenagers, we definitely know Nintendo. But they approached it. They looked at the market, they saw what was out there, and then they nice and the idea, and then moved upon that and built upon that. And we all know, or Starbucks, that started as like a coffee roaster, selling the beans and not actually the shops, as we all are familiar with now. So the idea here is to not just to run with every idea, but rather to accept it and to think about it at least. And when you bring in other people, like a sales manager or a customer service department lead or someone like that, they may say, yeah, this is actually something our customers are asking for. And right away, that might actually give you an idea. So businesses pivot, things like that. So it all comes by being accepting and approaching it that way.
Angie, tell us a little bit about what you're doing there.
I'm at a mute button there. So my business partner and I, weekly, we meet with our team leads, where they will go over where they are specifically in that area of our business, for over the week or so. And it's nice because if there's any issues that one team lead is seeing, then we have our other team leads that are there to help, facilitate answers and problem solving. And then we're all on the same page. If we get phone calls coming in, then everybody kind of has an idea of what it's about. So for example, if our turf manager goes out and he sees like dollar spot fungus or something, then he'll tell all of us like, hey, here's what we're seeing on the turf right now. If people are calling about a brown patch in their yard, it's probably dollar spot fungus. They need a fungicide treatment, help get them set up for a treatment or so forth. And so It's nice that every week we meet with them, they go over what they're doing currently, what the week ahead looks like, and then if there's any issues, then we all just kind of round table it.
I love that, Angie, because you've got the dialogue going, right?
Right.
You're speaking to your team members, and you're also seeing, you're noting what's happening in the marketplace, and so you can address that with your clients as well, and either sell them a new service, or maybe upsell them on some treatment or something like that. So I think that's great. I think the fact that you're doing that is great.
It helps too, just with the communication piece of it, because then everybody knows where everybody's at too. So like I said, it helps with phone calls, or if we're doing a landscape someplace, then everybody's like, oh yeah, that's over in this area or whatever. But so it is nice to have that dialogue with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I once wrote a blog post that the title was "I Am Not a Gardener." And it was all about this idea where, sometimes, like, for example, I just rebranded my company at futureforth.com. It's got a brand new look, brand new logo, and all of that. And for years, and the original logo was something I designed, which was, it was okay, but not great. And so the point of that article was, really to encourage people to hire a professional. Yeah. And my lawn has never looked better since hiring an actual company to take care of it, because for years, that was the theme of that article. I thought that would resonate with you, because for years my lawn was an embarrassment. I mean, lawn, I should use air quotes, because it was really just a muddy pile of dirt and sticks and weeds. So sometimes you do have to hire a professional to help. So I like that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Dave, I want to go to Marilyn. One of the things I was going to ask you was, social distancing and the inability to go see people has created some really, really bad sales outreach habits. So I think Marilyn wants to talk a bit about that too, of sales. Yeah. Marilyn, you want to unmute there?
Okay, there. Now, my question is, when you're face-to-face with someone, or I've always felt that with face-to-face, you have more control. Mm-hmm. When you are in a Zoom call with a potential client, is there a different way? Do you language it differently to work on a close? Or you do it the same, or do you basically do it the same way that we're always doing, that we've always done?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marilyn. I don't have it right now, but I normally have, I've got all these Post-it notes on my desk, and I usually have a Post-it note with an upside down smiley face, and it's right on the camera, right above the camera. So it reminds me, as I'm speaking on Zoom, that, Marilyn, I'm talking to you and I'm looking at you. And when you're looking at me, you're seeing me look at you, as opposed to me looking down here or over there. So the webcam is obviously such an important tool now. And so to use that is such an important feature. As far as like online communication goes in this format, you're right. I mean, you can, if you're actually having like a sales call with one-on-one, there are signs that you might be losing somebody a little. They may be looking away. They may, so it's important to I have a friend, Scott Rouse, who just wrote a fantastic book on body language. Mm-hmm. And so you can start to read, and this is actually something I talk about a little bit as well, is how to read different body language. Now, I'll tell you, this guy is the guy that the FBI call when they need assistance with an interrogation. So he's like full on legit. So I use what I know, but when I talk to Scott in person, it's brutal because I'll be talking to him and I'll like cross my arms and I'm like, oh gosh, that's telling him I'm not in, or like my feet aren't pointed at him, they're pointed away. Oh no. And so I'm always joke with him that like, I don't know what to do with my hands or my body as I'm speaking with him. But so, and one of the key caveats to what he talks about in his book and about body language is, when you're speaking to somebody, you can obviously get some readings from even just the face, But as he mentions, and that caveat is you've got to take like multiple signs and kind of put those together to get an understanding. Because as I said, like, you know, this may be someone that you're speaking to, this prospect who doesn't really know how to use a web camera. So they may be looking down at your face down below on their monitor. So it may not mean that they're bored. It may mean that they're just, you know, not sure what's going on. So those caveats are important to consider too. But yeah, it's a great question.
Let's go to David.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave, I tell you, I really love this nice and it is so I think it's so useful to be able to help validate people that are putting forth the effort to to provide their input, to give their ideas, et cetera. I once also had someone very, very, very senior tell me that not only what I said was the stupidest idea he had ever heard, but he has people coming in all day telling him stupid things. So I feel for you. How can people be effective, and how effective do you think it can be as far as mentoring up? Sometimes the people that are, in a position, a higher level position, either they just don't have the empathy, or they don't have the experience or the skill set to realize what they're doing, is actually just crushing people,
right?
When the way they react, and that can even be, how they react non-verbally as well as what they say.
Yeah, that's a great question, David, and yeah, thank you for that comment too. I believe so. I have a training and a talk I do called the ROI of nice, and I do this as a presentation and a training as well, depending on the audience. But so with that talk, I have examples of leaders who have found ways to give back to their team members in ways to make them feel more heard and feel more empowered and so on. One of them is, for a leader, there's a one gentleman and whose name is escaping me right now. Hey, buddy, Robert's kiddo there. But one of those ideas is to write thank you cards for your team members. It's such a simple thing, but this gentleman ran a bank and he had 1,000 employees, and every Monday he would write one thank you card or more than one to some of his team members. And so it makes you pause and stop and think about like who your team members are. First of all, it makes you think about them, and it makes you just kind of unplug for a minute and think, okay, why should I be writing a thank you card for this person? Well, they did this, and this. It starts to make you feel better. I can guarantee that thank you card will go over gangbusters. And sending something tangible like a thank you card, like an actual physical card or a gift or something like that, it goes such a much longer way than just sending an email or something like that. So I think it helps to practice this idea of empathy by stopping and thinking about your team members and considering what they may be going through and some of the wins that they've provided or some of the value they've provided for you and your organization. So I think that's a really great step in the right direction.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Hey, Dave and Randy, two things. I wanted to pile on the nice thing. I've written a couple books and I do keynote speeches.
Nice.
And I talk about the people that I look for to fill in my organization in my 30-year business career. And I always say I look for A+ players who are nice.
Ah, great. I love it.
And I specifically use the word nice because it makes people flinch, because you're in the business world and they're like, why the hell do you care whether they're nice? Well, my usual answer is, I'm going to spend 11 freaking hours a day with this person 5 days a week. I don't need an asshole. Okay. So, and I've also figured out that you can find A+ players that are actually nice. And if you settle for someone that's great at their job, but you hate being around them, there's a whole lot of drain that goes into that. So I really appreciate that. And it's the way I try to hire and attract. The other thing is I wanted to thank you. I learned something about myself earlier in the discussion. In my speeches, when I give a keynote, I love them, and I'm a little crazy. I do a little more cussing than I should, and I'm spitting, yelling, and storytelling. But one of the things I do is I love Q&A way more than I love my speeches, and I realize now why. I'm going to it's my version of improv.
Yes.
I don't know what question's coming. I'm going to answer it. I am very unfiltered. Most of the people on this Zoom would say, oh, yes, he's the definition of unfiltered. And that gets me fired up and enthusiastic, and I love it. And I never really thought about it, but I've never done improv and I've never done stand-up, but that's my version of it. So now I have a way to kind of label it and harness it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. Couple points to that. Do you record your talks?
Sometimes, but also I try at least twice a year. I videotape them because I need to be better at what I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. One recommendation I would give you is if you know somebody in the audience, even who can shoot your talk with a phone or something, for the performance side, and I do performance and speaking training as well. But my point to I worked with a group of trainers recently, or not recently, I guess everything was recently in my mind, but it was a half-day presentation skills workshop that I did for them. But my point to that is, I mean, obviously you want to record it just to see how you're doing and things like that. But by recording the Q&A, especially, even on your phone with the voice memo app, record your Q&As. Because in the heat of the moment, you're like, boom, like when you perform improv after the show, you talk to your fellow cast members about, the performance and, but oftentimes you forget what you did. Or if you've gone to see a stand-up comedy show, for example, you probably had a great time. I would hope you had a great time. And then when you're driving home with your partner or whomever, you might say like, I don't remember any jokes, like 0 jokes. You remember none of them. So because you're in the moment and you're having a great time, in the Q&A portion of talks, yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way when I do talks as well. So to that point, if you record it, you can go back to the topics that you talked about and the questions you got, and that might inspire ideas for your next book, inspire ideas for blog posts. Maybe if you're getting a question regularly from different audience members, that might give you an idea to add something into a presentation, something like that. So I will give you that. Also, because you said asshole, every once in a while, and we're all almost all grown-ups.
I'm supposed to be on 5-second delay every time I talk. Randy forgot to do that for me.
Well, because you said that, I did want to point something out too. So I run this website called networkingfornicepeople.com. And I had cards and things. And I remember I was at like some networking events and it happened more than once where somebody would tell me like, oh, I'm an asshole. I don't want to networking for nice people. And so I bought the domain networkingforassholes.com. And I tell you right now, it goes over amazing when somebody gives me this, I'm a jerk, I don't want. And I say, okay, go on your phone right now then, if you're an asshole, and go to networkingforassholes.com. And they get a little surprise when they do. So
that's so beautiful. I can't stand it. I want to add one other thing. It must have been 10 years ago. I heard a lady speak. She had a book and it was about the use of and versus but. And she had us do a little exercise. And it's extraordinarily powerful. There's probably psychological research and data behind it, but I don't care about that. I'm going by opinions only right here.
Sure.
It was powerful because if you say no and versus no but, the perception that the person has that's listening to you and how you're taking them is materially different.
Right.
And that goes, that thought that she had taken us through the exercise, you think more highly of the person that says the ands, but is always a negative, virtually always seen as a negative. And so I would pile on to that to say how powerful you talked about the and thing is cool.
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting because that is, a but is considered a block in improv. So you could imagine in an exercise, or like if I was on stage performing improv, and we got a give from the audience. So let's say it was like a screwdriver. Then I would like hand this invisible screwdriver to a fellow actor, and I'd say, "Hey, here's my screwdriver," and they'd say, "No, but it's a rhinoceros." The audience would be like, "What?" So like you're kind of blocking and you're killing the scene by doing that. So it's a great point. I mean, it is kind of this passive negative way of saying yes, but because you are like you give them just a moment of like, and then so yeah, great point, definitely.
Well, thank you for that. Randy and I are co-presenting tomorrow, and so I think the Networking for Assholes website may have a part in the discussion. Linda Endicott is flinching somewhere right now as she realizes this just happened. So
if she had a mentoring session this morning, if she heard this, she might cancel us. I don't know. We'll hope she doesn't watch this tape. Dave, there are a lot of folks on here who are active to some degree on some platform of social media.
Yeah.
There are a lot of business leaders and a lot of folks involved with a lot of business leaders mentoring, and Joel's the chamber board president, and so he's coaching business. How do you coach businesses to use the tools and platforms to communicate both with their people, with potential customers? You got a Facebook crowd and an Insta crowd and a LinkedIn crowd and a TikTok crowd. And is there consistency across that, or do you tailor them? What would you tell business leaders to do in that aspect?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my book, New Business Networking, I actually have chapters on networking in person or virtually, and organizing your own events or attending conferences and trade shows and so on. But I also have chapters on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth. And so you have to understand that when you're speaking to somebody through social media, there's still, unless it's a bot nowadays, but chances are you're talking to a human. I often share the story of, and I've run social media for companies in the past and things like that. So and as I mentioned, I'm kind of an early adopter to a lot of social networks. And many years ago, I was going to a conference in Seattle, a technology conference. And I was at the airport in Nashville, and I was on the plane. I took my last sip of my Starbucks coffee, and it was all coffee grounds. And so I had like a mouthful of coffee grounds with a stranger sitting next to me. And I'm like it was just it was terrible. So I was really annoyed. So I took a photo of the cup and all the coffee grounds, and I tweeted it and sent it to @Starbucks and said, "Hey, thanks a lot for this @Starbucks." I forget what I said exactly, but it was whatever. I get to this Seattle technology conference, and now this is, I think, 2007 or 8, so early days for Twitter. But I go to this technology conference and Starbucks is there. And I go over to the person and I say, "Oh, it's great to meet you. I've run social media for companies before as well. And gosh, and I say, let me tell you a funny story." Now, they saw my name tag. And I said, "Let me tell you a funny story on the plane here." And he looked at my name tag and he's like, "Dave, I am Starbucks on Twitter. I saw your tweet and thanks so much." So I'm like, oh gosh. But it was a good reminder that when we are communicating with people on social, whether it's a brand name or whatever, you're still communicating with a human being. And so the way we treat each other on social media should go by the same rules as if we were here in the same room face to face. And unfortunately, that often gets lost or not even thought about, because it's so easy to write a tweet that's negative or mean to somebody without thinking twice about it. And so even if you're a B2B business, I'm a B2B business, you're really, it's a human that decides whether they're going to work with you or not. It's not a business that decides whether it's going to work with you. So by treating people as humans and thinking about this, it can really, really help. So, different, I have lots of advice for different social networks, certainly, but I think that main rule is important to consider as you're engaging with people as well.
So Harry's TikTok dance videos, you would have some coaching tips for him.
For TikTok, I would probably get you my 14-year-old daughter.
Okay.
She is an expert for TikTok. I only monitor and cringe by watching what she's doing there, and she does have a private account, thankfully. At least, yeah. It's interesting raising a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old right now, and in this day and age, we've had a lot of conversations about social media and about being media manipulation and misinformation and disinformation, and how social networks are designed to make you get addicted to them and things like that. So there's a lot of good with social, for sure, with social, but we call it all social media now. Back in the day, we called it social networking. And so I would often joke that I'm putting the social back into networking when I use social networks, because I'm trying to engage with people. I'm trying to have dialogue. Otherwise, I'm just like, just pontificating or just shooting out ads or something like that. And nobody wants somebody trying to sell them a set of steak knives over and over and over again. So with all due respect to any of you who sell steak knives.
One of my goals in life is to embarrass my kids. They're 26, 24, and 12. And man, I am good at it too. That is like the thing that I excel at more than anything, and I thrive on it. So I get it.
Yeah, I'm pretty good with that as well. I'm actually trying my best not to do it as much, just because right now it's tough. For those of you with with kids, I know one of you have a little one there, and it's great how they're so cute and lovable, and then they become teenagers, and it's like, oh, what happened to that cute little lovable kid? And then what I understand, and maybe you can mention this, or hopefully, but then they get out of that teen and their brains fully developed, and they become humans again, and they treat us nicely. So I'm excited about that.
One of the questions I get all the time, every week, is how do you get out and meet people and build a network? People are afraid, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to tell their story. How much in your networking training that you do you help coach? What's easy advice you've got for people that have never really ventured out and started?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we're getting there. We're so close right now to like doing in-person networking again. Well, first of all, I co-founded 2 conferences back in the day, and I ran 2 monthly networking events. So I have a lot of experience in doing this. And first of all, if as far as attending networking events, when you see somebody with a name tag or badge or lanyard or something like that, that is an invitation to go and speak to that person. Especially for a networking event, nobody goes to a networking event who does not want to talk to people. Why would you go to a networking event otherwise, right? So I always try to pick out the wallflowers, the people that are, standing by themselves, because keeping that in mind, they are there because they do want to meet somebody. They do want to talk to folks. And so they do want to network. So finding people that are on their own. When you do speak with somebody, ask open-ended questions, and let them do the bulk of the talking. We've all done this. We've all gone to an event, and then we're leaving, and we're reflecting on the event, and we're thinking, gosh, that woman I met, she was super nice. I really liked her a lot. What was her name? I don't remember her name. What did she do? I don't remember what she did. Where is she based? I have no idea. But I liked her. She was super nice. Well, the reason why is because she let you do the bulk of the talking. And so when you let the other person do the bulk of the talking, it actually goes over very well. Now, a tip that I give regarding networking events, conferences, and so forth is, after you talk to somebody, and you've learned more about them and what they do. If you ask for a business card, and I always say, don't ask for business cards from everybody you meet, save a few trees maybe, but instead ask for a business card from somebody you want to follow up with. Once you have their card, and you've said your goodbyes, make sure to go and discreetly write some notes on that card about the person, with some follow-up tips on what you should do when you follow up with them. And it could be anything. You might want to write some how they were dressed to remind you of like of who they were. But that way you can go back to your business cards, because we've all done this. We've all gone to a conference and we come back with a pile of business cards and they sit on our desk and they collect dust and we spill coffee on them. And then like months later, we look through them and throw them in the garbage because we don't know who these people are, right? We've all done this. I've done this too. So this is your opportunity to take a note about the person. Keeping in mind, by the way, important point, culturally, this can be quite offensive. So if you're speaking to someone, perhaps Asian, I know Chinese people are extremely offended if you take their card and just like, stick it in your pocket, or you don't look at it or accept it with two hands. So writing on a card can be, looked at really badly. So sometimes it's better just to wait till you're back to your hotel room, or you are in the bathroom, at least sneak away and write some notes that way too. And follow up, to your question about networking that way. I always talk about the three most important parts of networking. The first is to show up. We're all here right now, so show up. Kudos to everybody here. The second point here is to catch up, to follow up. That means that once the conference has ended or whatever the event is, follow up with those people. Write them an email and say, hey, it was a pleasure meeting you. Let's set up a 15-minute Zoom call, virtual coffee. I'd love to, get to know you a little more and what you do. So follow up. And then the third part is to catch up. And that means either if you're using a CRM or setting a reminder on your calendar, or maybe it's the next year and that big annual conference is taking place again, go through and start to write back to these people to catch up with them before that next event. See if they're attending again this year. And that way, maybe you can get together with them in person as well. So show up, follow up, and catch up.
And the social distanced version of the business card right now is the LinkedIn request, which is, hey, I think we're best friends. And then the very next message is, I need to sell you something. And, how do you help coach people? And I know people have quotas and they got to make so many contacts and they got to fill up their CRM, but how do you coach people to tap the brakes a little and build a relationship before they're right into the pitch?
Yes. Not everybody is a prospect. It's so important to think about that. And I have my own methodologies with LinkedIn. I do, a little side project that I do where I audit LinkedIn profiles. So I actually spend an hour live with somebody and I go through their LinkedIn profile and give them feedback on how to optimize it and how to use LinkedIn more effectively. And it's cool too, because I connected it to a food bank here in Nashville. So I give 10% of all the proceeds to this food bank. So for every audit I sell, we provide 100 meals through the food bank, which is cool. But to the point, to your question about LinkedIn, first of all, when you send a connection request on LinkedIn, never send the default connection request, right? Always customize it. And this is, again, your chance to say, if you let's say we meet at a conference, Randy, and I think, okay, I really want to follow up with you. And I've done that through email. If I want to connect with you on LinkedIn as well, which is logical because we've met, in the email, when I follow up with you, I'll say, hey, Randy, I'm going to send you a LinkedIn connection request. I'm more than happy to connect you with someone or introduce you to someone in my network should you need it. And just by mentioning that little note, that lets the person know that you're trying to connect with, that, hey, I'm opening up my Rolodex, there I date myself again, to my Rolodex to you. And so right away, you're sending them a connection request and providing them something of value. And that's always the thing with networking, right? It's a two-way street. And if you can provide value to people first and foremost, they're going to like you. They're going to, you're going to earn their trust, or vice versa. And then ultimately, hopefully they'll either do business with you or maybe refer you to someone else who also could be a client. So, but LinkedIn is very valuable. And I think a lot of sales managers or a lot of people misunderstands LinkedIn. If you're a leader of a company, I've known of leaders of organizations who ban their staff from using LinkedIn. And they banned it because they would see these updates and they would think that their team members are leaving. They're updating their resume on LinkedIn. And then they would think, oh gosh, they're leaving. Which if that is your main concern, that your team members are leaving, then we need to talk. Right. So, but using LinkedIn is so valuable because you can use LinkedIn to search and find people at organizations to connect you or that you can connect with, but start to have the conversation first. And back to like all social networks, treat it like you would networking in person. So if we were to meet at a conference or a networking event, you wouldn't just start selling me whatever it is that you had to sell, right? That would be horrible. Or if you interrupted a group of people speaking, be like, oh, really? I've got some pens for sale. You just wouldn't do that. But yet people treat social media, because it's sort of this one way, or it seems this one way dialogue, where you go on LinkedIn and everybody you connect with, you're selling them pens. And it's like, whoa. We haven't even gone on our first date yet. So it's important to keep all of this in mind. And that gets back to your original question about, how we treat others on social, right? We're not there to sell. We're there to build relationships, earn trust, and then ultimately, hopefully they like us and they'll do business with us.
Yeah, I love what Adam suggests here about forcing people to have a call. That's awesome, Adam.
I love that too. And yeah, so the way I handle LinkedIn connection requests is I have a little script. It's a little pre-written script that I do, and I send that. This is part of the LinkedIn training and part of the NICE methodology that I use. I have a little, a couple paragraphs that I send to everybody that requests a connection request from me, unless I see them and I recognize them straight away, or there's somebody like, if I don't know, Richard Branson wants to connect, I'll be like, all right. But aside from that, I just send this default message to everybody who sends me a connection request. And then I click ignore. And I'll tell you right now, I would say maybe 10%, maybe 20% reply. And of those people, maybe 5 or 10% are people I want to connect with. So this is just a great way, because back in the early days of social media, we would connect with everybody. And it was a mistake in retrospect, because in LinkedIn, you're opening up your Rolodex to strangers. And that's, and you're just missing out. So I want to be able to know my connections on LinkedIn personally, so that, Adam, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn and you say, hey, Dave, I see that you're connected to David, I would love to connect with him. I'd be like, I know Adam. Yeah, no problem. And I can provide you with that introduction to David. But if I don't know David, it's going to be kind of challenging.
Yeah, the quality of word searching on those has gone down. Harry and I are in a Hellsberg Entrepreneurial Mentoring Program, whose acronym is HEMP. So I've been contacted by every CBD distributor in America, I think, because I just see hemp on my profile.
Oh,
and they think I'm in that business.
That's hilarious.
And that's a bad thing?
Make sure your eyes aren't too bloodshot in your profile photo, because that might also be a problem.
Marilyn has another question.
There, I have to unmute. Could you give us some input? One of my beliefs has always been that you have to give before you can get. And the analogy is I can't go to the bank and draw out money if I haven't put some in there first.
Yes.
And I see, and I'm sure you do too, I see so many people that to them, networking means, gosh, I got to get an appointment with them, and then I got to talk to them about what I do. So could you say a little bit about what I call giving before you can get?
Yes, and it's such an important point. And yeah, I read a lot about this. I've written about this in my book, and when I talk about networking and I do presentations and training about this, you're absolutely right. You need to find ways to provide value to people first and foremost. So whether that's providing them with an introduction to somebody. I think instead of asking people, how can I help you, by listening, and you can use social media to listen to people. And there's ways to do that by creating lists and following people on LinkedIn and so forth, not connecting, but following them. You can get an idea of like, oh, I really like this person. Let me see what they're all about. And you can start to get an idea, like maybe they're posting about some issue that they have at work. And that might be an opportunity for you to reach out and say, I've got a great idea, or if your lawn's terrible, I know a great nursery operator here who can help with that. So I think it's really about listening first and finding opportunities to provide value to people first and foremost, before asking for anything in return, and sometimes not asking for anything in return. Right. So, and often, like I always say, like with all things, like if it feels icky, if you feel like, oh, I don't know if I should send this email, it comes off a little, then don't. Or rethink it, reword it. So often we send, and again, it's just so simple to send an email or post on social. But I think finding ways to provide value first is key to helping people. So I think that's just such an important step. So yeah, give first. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Dave, these were really powerful reminders. A lot of great information.
Yeah, it's a great group. I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you for having me.
Everyone can find you at davedelaney.me, right?
Yeah, davedelaney.me. You can also find my business at futureforth.com. But or networking for nice people. I'm all over the web.
Or networking for assholes. It goes right there too.
Or that one too. That will take you there as well.
If you get a lot of Rockhurst students tomorrow checking that one, then you'll know Harry and I pumped the pipeline there.
It is pretty fun in conversation with people to with all depending who I'm speaking with and the language they're using, of course.
Well, great. It was great to spend time with you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Randy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah,
thank you.
And
thank you.
Reach out and
Thanks,
say hello. I would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Put a customized message in your LinkedIn request to Dave.
Yes, there you go.
I already blew that one.
No worries.
All right, everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.